Welcome into the very first episode of the SorareData NBA show. I am Andrew Laird, head of content here at SorareData. This is going to be the beginning of a long series of stuff that we're going to do. Joining me today, two guys from Sorare. I'm going to call it FP for now. Alex Hooper and Keith Jamison. They are going through a little bit of a identity crisis, and we'll get into all of that in a little bit. But they are two Sorare players just like me who have a background in a variety of sports, including playing daily fantasy sports. We've all been playing Sorare soccer or football for a while now. Alex was into baseball, still is very much. I don't think Keith got into baseball as much, but we are really excited about basketball, and we wanted to get together today to talk about basically everything that's happened in the last week, even though it feels like it could be 10 years. Particularly for Keith, who is still waiting for certain competitions to open as we are here on Wednesday, October 26th. Thank you to everybody who has joined us in the chat so far. If you guys wouldn't mind hitting that like button, that's always appreciated. For anybody that's new here, because you are either new to Sorare or new to SorareData, we're going to go through a bunch of stuff. We're not going to walk through the Sorare NBA game. We're kind of hoping that that's already taken care of, but we are going to go through some tools on SorareData, kind of just as part of our discussion of everything Sorare. So, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Keith, why don't we just get this off the bat? Please tell everyone why you're not completely thrilled with Sorare NBA yet.
I like freezing myself to not bring out the negativity too early. No, it's an awesome platform. Just the crux of it is that role players that are number 8 off the bench right now are more expensive than a few superstars. And I'm just not about that life.
All right, so we'll get into some examples of that. The cover boy, like the thumbnail was Keegan Murray. We'll explain why both he was extremely expensive and why he is not right now. Alex, you guys basically did dueling videos on your Sorare channel. So anyone who hasn't already subscribed to Sorare, I believe that's Sorare First Pitch. You wonder why it was first pitch since baseball came before basketball. But
yeah, pretty much.
So they did
before we knew that basketball was going to exist.
Right, exactly. So they did dueling videos of I need champion, and Alex had a rebuttal of like, just settle down. Alex, can you at least tell us why you like this part of the game that's already open?
I like the lower points cap. I think you have to find more equitable plays. So I think the main thing for me is with baseball, my whole thing was I got to find value. Where am I finding value? What cheap players am I going to go out after that can replicate what a Mookie Betts can do in a given week? And I feel like I don't have to chase a crazy expensive guy like Jokic, Giannis, all of that in contender. And I can find guys via scouting. And while there have been hiccups in the first couple of game weeks because of just the way that things are set up, and those will persist next season in game weeks 1 through 3, 4, 5, perhaps. I don't think they're going to hang around that long just because of how the mechanics work. I think it requires, I said, a little bit more skill. I was maybe punching that up a little bit. I don't know that it's skill necessarily, but a little more creativity, and that's fun and fine for me.
I like that change from skill to creativity. I will say it's skill. So if you don't have to, you can be nice to Keith because you guys do enough shows together. You can stay nice to him, but I will tell you, I think it requires more skill. Not that champion will be skillless, but I think there's.
I think again, like just on the point, and then we can proceed as it goes. I think it's just more where I come down to. I don't disagree with the skill, the scouting element. I just think that from a casual perspective, I just think that mode without the MVP being 0, that actually should be a little bit more open on the cap, because it's always going to benefit somebody to try to get like an under 10 guy. And as the season goes forward, the under 10 guys are going to be thinner and thinner. So like my example was like Bol, who just went off against your Knicks. You know, you were joking to me that he looked great. but
He did look
it's
great.
not like the most fun thing ever to know that a guy that you're relying on your lineup on is probably going to play like 12 to 14 minutes. And then you see him go during his like 4-minute shift and he gets no points. And you're like, I'm fighting. I'm up against it right now. Because like the substitution patterns, he's only going to get maybe one more run. And you're like, damn it. Like that was not great.
Yeah.
And, it's just a lot more fun to be able to have the guys that are going to, consistently play 32, 36 minutes, are going to get a lot of usage and you can follow along. So I think it's even champion, maybe the price point's a little bit higher, but it's a little bit more fun to follow along too.
Yeah, I think that's fair, particularly just in terms of casual. Like we were on Quinny's podcast or Quinny's stream, excuse me, earlier this week. Was it yesterday? Could have been just yesterday.
It was yesterday or the day before. I can't remember.
Yeah, yesterday, the day before. But we were basically talking about how just the way that the game works is really not that casual friendly. And the way that you can play soccer or baseball is you could buy 5 or 7 players. Baseball is a little trickier with pitchers if you want to have somebody all the time, but like you basically can buy just enough players to get into your lineups and play that all the time. And this points cap throws that completely out. And like the idea in the other sports is if you get a guy who's kind of underperforming, but you think is going to do better, you get the benefit of those like extra fantasy points when they do get better and your lineups become better. But in Sorare NBA, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, this guy doesn't fit the cap anymore. I got him at an L10 of 10. And now that he's 17, now I can't play, whatever 2 stars I want whenever champion opens. I promise you, Keith, it's going to open. Don't worry. It will open at some point.
Oh, it's going to. It's going. It is funny though that it's gotten to the point that like you ran out to get a Jokic or an Embiid, or Embiid's a bad story because he actually was decent for contender, but Giannis, like just talk about the top end, LeBron, Luka, and you're like, oh, week 3 of not being able to even come close to using them, unless maybe you could have fit them if you bought Keegan Murray, but then that was its own problem in itself because now you've got left holding a bag.
Yeah. So let's go into the Keegan Murray thing because that I don't think is a situation that we're going to see as drastic as we did in that one. So for those of you who were unaware, Keegan Murray came in with an L10 of 0 because he's a rookie, hadn't played, but was expected to score anywhere between like 25 and 35 fantasy points. But the fact that he had an L10 of 0 basically gave you like a free square. Like we discussed, it almost didn't even matter how many points he scored. Like obviously it was better if he scored 20 than it was 2. But the fact that he literally, and I can't figure out what phrase I'm going to keep using because I keep saying cost, like he only costs 0. But like we're going to look at a price chart soon. He definitely did not cost 0 for people who wanted his cards. But basically he had 0 points against the salary cap. And it's like, all right, now if you pair that with Giannis, Doncic, Jokic, like you get essentially their combined points for half of the cost of one of those superstars. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with SorareData, I'm going to pull up just the basic price graph that we have for Keegan Murray. And this is just, if you go to his player page, you just go to search and you type in Keegan Murray. And you can see, I have it here in US dollars. Now this has to purely
number one doesn't matter.
So the one, like the one serial numbers, I think were bananas for everybody. Like there was not, people think that they're collectibles. We're going to get into a conversation about collectibles later, but the 1 mints are always going to be more. So it's almost like you can throw those out. And then when the jersey mints come up, those kind of spike as well. So there were a lot of people on day 1 that were like, man, these prices are crazy. And it's like, the 1 is the outlier, 2 through 10 are probably outliers. And then we see a little bit of it settle. We did not see it settle with L10 of 0 Keegan Murray here, who clearly there was like, we saw a gap in his auctions. Like he had nothing from the 28th,
well,
the 20th.
And that's because he missed the first game, which actually is what caused the bottleneck.
That's right. So it was almost like they didn't want to mint any cards because, like, oh, if he's hurt, they're not going to mint them or mint anymore. So we see this this spike, or excuse me, we see this break, and then all of a sudden he comes back, and it's like, oh, this guy is basically a cheat code, and everybody rushes to get him. And we see his price on the 22nd, was this 4 days ago, go from $104 to $246, all the way up to $334. And I realize that a lot of people use Ethereum in these prices. I think more people are going to be looking at these in dollars, so I'm just going to keep referring them in dollars. So this was like the non-one mint one peak, $334. And Keith and I talked about it on Twitter, and I'm at Andrew M. Laird. He's at GatorGuy231. Alex is at Lex Hooper. And we were like, there's going to be a price crash on Keegan Murray. And
watch out.
Right. Like, it's if you're going to buy this card, you have to know that it's going to, I didn't even put a number on it. Like, it wasn't going to be half. I mean, it got really low.
I think that's what we said. It's going to crater.
It's going to crater, right. And the simple reason was, as soon as the game week ended and his L10 updated from 0 to basically anything, to be honest, like, he is less valuable in a lineup at that point. But the fact that he then went up to 28 made him almost like unplayable, because he's now an L10 of 28 and expected to score about 28. And so you're not getting any value out of that card either. And as a result, what we saw was everybody basically jumping ship, and the last one sold for $35 at auction. Were either of you able to get a Keegan Murray at all?
No, I did not pursue one. I mean, my lineup was set.
Okay.
Yeah. And I even had laid it out. I don't think I said this on the stream, but I had laid it out to, like, the Discord that we have for the baseball and now basketball. It was essentially, the problem with Keegan became, like, the first place prize is going to be Jokic, who I don't know in dollar terms, but was probably the same price as that top Keegan Murray. So it's like, all right, I'm trying to win the first prize, who is worth at or less than the guy who's going to be worth potentially a 5th or a 10th after the game week. So it's like, there's actually a negative, like, expected value play.
Right.
So it almost was like buying Keegan. Well, yes, it gave you the cheat code. It made you go, if I don't win first, I'm going to take a pretty big loss here, unless I just believe in Keegan Murray long term, which, I mean, the dude's the 4th pick in the draft. It's not like he was a terrible player by any means, or never going to be worth anything. It's just, he's always going to somewhat outperform this peak price, like this peak. I'm struggling, like you, Laird. What do we call it? Like the L10. I'm calling it price, but it's definitely not price. Outperform his L10. We'll just call it that. But if his L10 is 30, he's the guy that's going to really struggle to have the ceiling to make it worth your while.
Yeah, I think it really came down to that. Now, he's like he was basically the outlier in terms of everything. Like, we saw a few other guys with L10s of zeros. It was basically rookies that didn't play the first game, or their first game came outside. Christian Brown was another one. The difference with Murray is there was at least some confidence that he was going to score like 25 to 35. The problem is that he was probably not going to score 50 or 60. And I don't think there's an expectation that anything can happen.
Well, ever.
But right. It's possible he'll never get there. And you need that to justify these prices now. So at this L10 of 28, Alex, do you think he's worth a buy at now that he's so much cheaper, or is it like he's actually still overpriced because of how high he got?
Yeah, he's still overpriced. I could find probably about 50 to 100 players who all fall in that 1-to-1 projected points to L10. Like, that's kind of like you mentioned. And DFS players know 1x your price generally ain't going to cut it.
Right.
And for Sorare, generally what I'm seeing is like 2 to 3x just in the first couple of weeks. But 1x is far, far away. And there are so many guys that are, I mean, by using their last 10 scores down the line, projections are only going to exceed or, deflate below their last 10 so many more times without a change or complete change in their role, really.
Yeah.
So you're going to see most people floating around that one, and generally, especially for people who play contender only, there's no reason to even have them. You just kind of have to hope someone falls out of favor. I won't say get hurt.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. We'll get into the projection thing in a little bit because we did have a few questions from people who tweeted them in. Thank you to all of those people who did. There were actually a bunch that were all very different, which is kind of nice because, the game is very new. So I think a lot of people are just kind of trying to figure out how to get going here. Keith, let's say, and Wonderwall in chat was like, didn't they say Champion would open mid-November? My guess, well, Champion Super Rare, I believe, is already open.
It's already open. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why they're waiting for Rare and Limited. My only thought is that it's pushing up the prices of the Keegan Murrays of the world. It's not even really the Keegan Murrays either. It's like I was going to say Grant Williams, but I don't want to bring him up already.
Oh, no. Everybody just needs to know, if you want to watch Laird's gallery, just zag.
Yeah. Hard.
Some of the same luck is carried over.
Yeah. No, but like, so the key players that people are looking at, and with the way that projections are, like, you're generally not going to see a player's projection be way different depending on the projection system that you're using. Like, a lot of people who play DFS are already familiar with like multiple projection systems. We're going to use RotoWire on SorareData. Some people may have already seen that stuff already, but they're not drastically different. And so what basically everyone is going to do is, what are the projected points and what's a player's L10 average? And then you have to decide if you want to pay whatever the market price is for that. Like, that's everything. That's how this game is going to be played. And that doesn't mean that's the only way you can play Sorare. Like, there are plenty of trading opportunities. My God, if you knew Keegan Murray early and then decided to sell him, like, that's a tremendous profit right there. But it's really coming down to a projection game. And so there were some, I'm trying to figure out one of these questions because one of them was specifically about the projections, but it was essentially like, what do you do when all the projections are good? And now, like, everybody's basically chasing the same players. And what happens is that week to week, those players are going to be different. And the ones that were like the ones you need to get in game week 6 are different than the ones you need in game week 7.
Right.
And like, what happens to your game week 6 card that's now like not as valuable? Like, it's really a bummer how like it's like prohibitive in the game to get a guy with a low L10 and have him absolutely smash his face off, because like, it'll take a little time, but like, that's like a weird construct of this game that will take time to figure out. But it almost just feels like we're going to end the season and all of us are just going to own so many cards for those of us who are like trying to be competitive like every week. Alex, you keep shaking your head or nodding your head. Like, is there anything more to it other than that?
No, not really. I was actually having a conversation with Surface earlier today, trying to figure out, is it better to churn towards the bottom end of your gallery? So like Cameron Payne, Duncan Robinson are guys that we were looking at, or are you better off cycling out at the top of your gallery? Because a guy like Joel Embiid was fantastic at like 35 or something L10, and now he's creeping up towards 39, and he's probably going to go up to 41. And if things go right, he's going to move up. So essentially, like, if you win a card, someone in your gallery is overperforming their L10. So all of a sudden, the clock starts ticking on that person, and you have to decide. It looks like it's going to take about 2-3 game weeks for players to like really cycle out of utility.
Yeah.
So if you win something, all of a sudden in your head, you should be like, all right, who do I sell and when? When do I need to get off player X, Y, or Z? Or do I just keep and try to build a bigger gallery? For me, pretty much all my Ethereum is tied up in baseball right now. So I'm like, my limited team rather is like 0.1 ETH, something like that. So eventually the supply demand is going to dry up, and I'm probably going to get stuck with whoever I have at the time. So if I do win a card, I'm going to have to decide who's worth it long term, if anybody. But yeah, that's kind of the conversation worth having is Embiid going to be worth 45 because he can put up 66? Or would you rather have a guy like Cameron Payne, who right now I think is sitting at 9 and put up a 20 last night? It's 11 excess points versus, I don't know what the first number I threw out there was for Embiid, but basically like excess points for the L10 in your gallery, stuff like that. It's going to be a constant math problem, I think, and trying to figure out where you want to take losses versus where you want to take gains, stuff like that, and when you actually want to play someone.
Yeah, like you brought it up. So Embiid was a popular choice this game week because of that L10 of 39. People know kind of how high he can score. Obviously, he hit 66 2 games ago and then came back with that 42 in 28 minutes. We have projections here. I'm going to say that like the further out you project, the more noise there is. So like that's something to understand, that like he may have a 59 against, projected right now against the Bulls, and that game's in 3 days, but that doesn't necessarily, like, that could change also. So whatever news there is, if other people come, other guys play, then, or other guys sit out, like projections just change a lot. So I will say that just like the further out you go, and in a lot of game weeks, there could be 3 games in a game week, that third game is probably pretty noisy. But anyway, I mean, we're looking at
permission to zag. Permission to zag real quick on this topic.
Okay.
So I do think that it is a projection game, kind of like what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a projection game for like air quote optimals. Okay. So almost like on the DFS side in terms of like a cash game. There is a correct lineup ultimately to play that the projection systems will spit out that will tell us that if we ran this simulation 1,000 times, this is the lineup we predict to win the most often. But we're not going to run it 1,000 times. We're going to run it once. And weird stuff is going to happen. Okay? Like, guys are going to get hurt. Guys are going to get ejected. Guys are going to get ruled out, like, the minute before tip. I still remember in EuroLeague, there was a guy that literally on the opening tip was running out. EuroLeague's not here, but it's still a guy named Shane Larkin. People might know him for Miami. Was running out to start the game, and he slips on the center court, injures himself on the tip-off, and was out. Like, random stuff is going to happen that's going to kind of mess with the optimals. And so just like we see with Embiid here and like your projections, which, with the projection system too, they're never going to really steers hugely wide. They're going to show, like, depending on how deep we go on SorareData, they're going to show ceilings, they're going to show floors, but the mean projection is always going to be pretty tight with some adjustments based on pace, with some adjustments that obviously if Harden's out, then Embiid's usage is going to pop up. And I think that's going to be where a lot of things, like, I don't want everybody to all of a sudden think, oh, I just need to get a projection system. I need to press optimize and I'll be set and I'll just print tier 0s or tier 1s or whatever that's going to be. Like, there's still going to be a lot of skill and things to be had by all of a sudden seeing, we just had it on the stream on Monday, Laird. Like, we got and that was like 2 hours before lock, and we got the notice that Brandon Ingram was going to miss. And I'm just like, Trey Murphy's going to smash.
Yeah.
And Trace Murphy dropped like 37 last night. And that's a name that's not like a household name to anybody, really. So I still think there's going to be a lot of edge to be had to understand guys miss games a ton. So, Brandon Ingram goes out. real quick who's going to be the guy that benefits from that, and you can act before the market. So I do think there's a lot of game to still be had in that. I don't want to just make anybody think this is just a pure projection system. Just hit optimize and go. I'll refute that one.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. One, I completely agree with you that if you are basically just like wed to a projection system versus L10 and you buy the optimal, you're probably not printing every week. It may be successful for like lower cards, and there will be weeks where it goes off, and that's fine. But being able, I think knowing what the optimal is going to be is actually a better trading strategy than it is a playing strategy.
Yep.
Because we know most people are just going to hit that optimize button and they'll be like, these are the 5 cards I need. And if you can do that ahead of time, then I think you're in a great spot. Like, I think, again, like, I think the trading opportunities in NBA are way better than soccer and baseball. Like,
and on that note, I wanted to actually steal something from that you and Sean talk about always on Strategy Show. Sean, and very right for it, is very big on like never selling the backup goalkeeper for backup goalkeeper pricing. And I would almost argue never sell a tier 5 in NBA for tier 5 pricing.
Mm-hmm. I like
because
that.
Those are the type of guys that are going to have the. I see Alex smiling, so at least we're constantly fighting on one thing.
It's just,
yeah, no, it's just because those are the guys that actually, in a lot of ways, they might just find themselves not playing, DNPing for, 9 straight games, or just getting like the 2 minutes, like the 2 minute like run that Cristiano Ronaldo would never play, like getting those last 2 minute BS time that they get 1 point, and that's going to be great for their L10. It's going to sink it down. Now all of a sudden, let's say that they're on the Thunder, they're on the Jazz, or a team that's about to tank and is going to trade away half their team. Now they all of a sudden may get into a role that's going to be hugely valuable, and then all of a sudden that guy might be the next Keegan Murray spike. So I would argue, like, if you buy a guy for $3, like, don't sell the guy for $3.50. That's not the trading opportunity that we're talking about. Like, we're saying that $3 guy, if you hold him long enough and the roll hits right, that $3 guy could be 30. I think we're going to see a lot of that type of stuff.
I think so. I was thinking about this recently, and the common game week, like my commons that I got, my best option was Kevin Durant, and I just knew, I'm like, all right, cool, I'm not winning anything in common ever. And then I got a tier 1 in contender in common in week 1 because Darius Garland was out, and I played Jetty Osman and Karis LeVert.
There you go.
And I won LeBron, and all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I'm a little closer now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up on Tuesday morning and I look and I'm winning a tier 1 in contender again. And I'm like, nice. And then I was like, do I want another tier 1? It's like, it's just going to be another guy I can't play.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be better than Durant, especially if it was Giannis or Luka or anything like that. But there's just that dynamic of like, I remember, Keith, when I snuck into Champion Europe tier 1 and I fell to literally the first position in tier 2, you were like, that's probably a good thing. And I ended up getting Valverde from Real Madrid instead of some, dude who was falling from grace in tier 1. And I feel like you're going to get a lot of that in NBA where like, oh, I fell to tier 3, but I got this guy who is like, I brought up Cameron Payne before. Chris Paul is going to sit eventually, and at some point Cam Payne will probably step into a little bit. So yeah, I think there's going to be way more value. There's going to be way more value in winning tier 4s and tier 5s as opposed to like baseball, where you get a relief pitcher and you need 4 guys to blow their arm out for him to ever even see any amount of time.
The tier 4 and tier 5 baseball cards are.
I know
horrible.
Enough. You guys joked about me not really getting MLB. I know enough to know that the troll in MLB is the RP, and just immediately you don't even want to finish your reward open. You're like, got screwed.
That part of the game is not fun.
Until you win the jersey mint of the guy you've been hoarding because you think he's going to be Spencer Strider.
There you go.
That was the 1 exception.
It is kind of weird, and I don't I don't know how to say this nicely, but based
Don't be
on
nice.
based on what we've seen previously, I worry about how they'll determine tier levels, because
Yeah.
basically
Oh my
in
God, you're
soccer
right.
they do it by value. Like more expensive players tend to be tier 0 and tier 1s. And if somebody wins Keegan Murray next week as a tier 1, like that's
Oh my God.
really bad.
No. Laird, you even said it wrong. First place
Well,
for
right.
limited, all of a sudden, Sacramento, small forward. Oh God.
Yeah. Oh God. And you hope it's like some Chris Webber legend card. But like,
Oh my gosh.
it's
I didn't even think about that. Oh,
it's
that's brutal.
hopefully it's fine. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
NBA is small enough in terms of the player universe that they can be like, we know who the tier 1s are. And then
I mean,
was that
the fact that you could run like you guys have had on SorareData, you know, we see that. I'm guessing that's already updated to this season, because going into the season, Embiid finished 4th overall on the stats last year, and I think you guys have already updated it. But
yeah.
I mean, you guys, in a lot of ways, I can't imagine that's. I'm not a coder, but it's not that hard to go. Here's the fantasy points. Like, here's their list, and let's just cut it by tiers and just do it that way.
No, I think, I hope it works out. I really do. But it is kind of that interesting. And so I'm like laughing with Alex being like disappointed that he's going to win another tier 1. Because like my immediate response is like, you just play it in champion. Like,
yeah,
this
exactly.
is why champion like is good, because like if you happen to smash, then there's a place to play it.
But
and
that was like furthering my point on like the whole thing, like kind of actually what Alex did is like, I think the product, and again, champion fixes this. I think that eventually, I won't think too much on that. I think eventually we might see like an uncapped or just like a super high cap. I'd be shocked if that's not something that happens on the low. There's too much money to be made from doing something like that, and Sorare should very much be for profit. But like people being disappointed. Oh God, my guys did so well this week. I'm gonna get stuck with Jimmy Butler. It's like that should be a good thing. Jimmy Butler, it's like a 3rd-team All-NBA guy. That's a good person to have in your lineups. And if you're pissed off that you got one, that's not a great longevity thing, in my opinion. So I think that's where, you know, the champion modes, I'm sure there'll be other modes that pop up that kind of fix that, because we all should strive to want the best players. That's how we have it in football. That's how you have it in baseball. There should not be this delineation that all of a sudden Nick Richards is the guy I really want in my gallery.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I do think, like, I think they'll have it at some point, this uncapped or something that allows you to play more than, you know, like a double cap or something like that. Although that probably handles that's basically uncapped anyway. But so we had a question basically from Nacho Aris that just said that, do we think the cap will be changed in the future? Maybe no cap tournaments will come. It does feel like you should, and like we don't get that in any other fantasy game. Like if you're playing season-long fantasy basketball, I guess theoretically, well, no, even in auctions, they like usually it's a salary cap. So at some point, like you can't get everyone. And in draft leagues, obviously, like it's one player per team. You know, one player can only be owned by one fantasy team. So like that's not going to happen. So there really isn't like a blueprint for a fantasy game where you can play Jokic, Doncic, Embiid, Giannis, and LeBron. And they'll have to come up with something to make it so that there aren't just 100 lineups of those 5 players. But that's not anything we need to solve at this point. I do want to start hitting up some of these questions because I think they're all basically topics I wanted to touch on. So Wonderwall, who I believe was in the chat earlier, if not still here, said, what do you see becoming the meta? Do you think it's 5 roughly 20 average guys who beat their average 1 week, or 1 to 2 big names squeezed in with cheat codes of the week? I also don't think I think cheat codes are gone. I think you just happen to have like worse players that you think will do better, but calling them cheat codes, I think, is over. I'll ask Keith because I don't think Alex wants to ever have to worry about playing two big names in contenders. So, Keith, what do you think you're going to end up with?
No, I think it's going to be the studs, because the studs are all like, if you looked at the game week last week, I might have it up. Actually, let's just look at this one, like right now. If I look at the leaderboard, at the top is SGA, who's, like a tier 2, tier 1 guy, but still a pretty elite player until they send him home. Doncic, Harden, Morant, Irving, random Desmond Bain. This will disprove me. Dame Lillard, right? So like that's just like the top of the list. All household names at the very top, guys that are broke 60. And that's just going to be how it is. Like the star players are going to be the ones that get the majority of the shots. Desmond Bain made it in there, but that's going to be like the outlier that's harder to ever predict.
Yeah, that's fair.
But what I don't think is going to be, I think we're going to get a lot of like repetition with the resting of star players. Like Joel Embiid's going to miss his 10, 15 games. Kawhi Leonard's going to miss 30 games. LeBron used to never miss games, but LeBron's going to miss 10 games. He's going to disappear to South Beach at some point in the season, come back a new man. There's going to be like all these guys, like, and it just happens in the NBA. That's just how the league is structured. Like,
yeah,
it's an 82-game season, but a majority of stars do not consider it an 82-game season. Like very often you'll like look at the calendar, like even as DFS players, we'll look ahead like 2-3 games and go, oh, that's where Embiid's going to rest. Like, it's like,
sure,
there was 2 straight home games, and then there was a home game, then a rest day, a home game, and then they had to fly to Utah. And it's like, oh, Joel is not playing. Like, he's just going to take that game off.
Sure.
Or a lot of times too, like bettors are really big on this, but you will have teams that will play. Alex may help me with this better, but they'll play like in LA for one game, and then they'll play, like if it's an East Coast team, they'll play the Lakers and they'll play the Clippers because they're already out there, and then all of a sudden they'll get like a rest day, or then they'll fly out to Denver and it's an altitude game, and half the guys literally will actually say, like, I'm not playing an altitude game on third game in 4 nights. It's just not happening. So like you can kind of predict those spots, and I think that if you have, I see Bob made a comment, but Bob's big on this, that if he has like I think one of the examples he gave me is like a Patty Mills, just thinking that Kyrie is just gonna Kyrie some games this year and just decide that he's not feeling it. That all of a sudden, if I have 3 times in a week, that's three chances that Kyrie is just going to be himself, and that Patty Mills is going to get a spot start and has the opportunity to blow up. And the great part about those type of guys that just blow up one time is that their L10 is going to be pretty consistent. And even with one blow up score, it's not going to move the needle. They're going to go from like 12 to 14. It's not going to be a huge difference. So I think that's how I'm tackling it, is to having a good variety of the studs in my gallery that I can, when 3 to 4 points matters a ton to even it out, that I can swap a Jokic for a Giannis, or swap that type of build, or even like I can't get to Jokic, but I can play Lillard this week to fit the right value that's in there. I think that's how it's going to be done. But I do think especially in Champion, you're not going to see a leaderboard that all of a sudden doesn't have the big names in it. I hope that answered the question. I think it sort of did. But
yeah.
I think just utilizing the news and utilizing, guys that are going to get the usage bumps, because those are going to be the cheat codes.
Right.
They're not going to be the Keegan Murray cheat codes that it's 0, but you're going to have, we'll just use Patty Mills. I don't know if that's the greatest example ever, but Patty Mills is going to sit at an L10 of 14, and then there's going to be a game that Durant and Kyrie sit, and Patty Mills is going to get 15 shots. And if he's hitting from 3, he could drop 35 very easily. And then that would be like the cheat code for the week.
As someone with a Patty Mills comment, I would welcome that blow up game. Alex, I'm going to go to you because Keith told me something that I don't want to believe, and I feel like you will allow me. I'll believe it if you agree with him. So he told me that basically in Champion, you cannot win without Jokic, Doncic, or Giannis. And he didn't totally mean it.
I said it.
But he definitely said it. And I'm not going to argue that if you don't have any of those guys, you'll win more than if you do have them. But like, how much do you think those guys are actually required to be successful in champion? And granted, we're saying this before we've ever seen a champion contest run. And so I think we're very much in this part of Sorare NBA where like nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, nobody will ever know what's going to happen, but like we can have our theories and whatnot, and that's what we're here to throw out there. But how required are, and is it, let me actually cut to Keith quickly. Keith, is it just those three guys, or are you willing to put LeBron in there too?
I think I'd be more willing to put Ja Morant in the way the season's going. Ja Morant's been, I don't know if he might be your number one ranked player right now.
So is it? So it's Morant, Giannis, Doncic, and Jokic. So Alex, if somebody asked you, how would you play champion? Are you going out and getting 1, 2, all 4 of those guys, or how are you playing that?
I would get the 3 Euros. I don't know that I believe Morant's track record. Like he feels like more of a scorer, assister than a guy who's going to put up triple doubles consistently as the same guys, or the 3 Euro guys. I would get all 3. To answer the first question, my guess is about 80% of champion lineups over the course of the season will have one of those 3 guys, those initial 3 guys in them. And 80% might be too low. Maybe it's right on. But my guess is one of those 3, because they so often put up the scores that literally no one else reaches. Like the peak scores, like 84 or something for those guys, maybe even higher. You just don't see other people put that up.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a guy in that top level, the elite level, that have just a lower L10, and then they put up a similar score. Like Mitchell.
It's a great one.
He's a 40 right now, and that's just because he's coming from a different situation, I guess. I don't know if he rested at the end of the season with Jazz. I don't know why it's much lower, but I know he shared the workload, and then all of a sudden Garland goes down, and he's not going to be that guy long term. But generally, one of those stars, James Harden right now, is a lower L10, and I think they're just going to be values at each tier, and I think that's going to make up the optimal.
Yeah,
and. Right. Unless you get that news that Keith was talking about where a guy's down and you get a minutes bump, unless you get it on lock day or the day before instead of like a midweek, or if you predict it, then you're just going to get those guys who should outperform their tier. And that's just how I'd roll it. I don't know what I would do for that second star. I don't think, a Giannis, Jokic, and a bunch of stiffs are going to win a lot because the difference isn't that high and they would need to hit. But I think I would get those first 3, and then I would try to find and try to predict, which I don't know how I'd do that, but I would try to figure out who that tier 1 who is going to more often pop off. Like who's a guy? I'm thinking of Jamal Crawford, but he's not a tier 1. Like who is a guy who is going to be in that like Curry 51 range? I'm just kind of looking here. Like Jason Tatum, I would imagine a guy at 48 is a guy who can put up a 65, 70 every now and then.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool thing about kind of what you're saying there too is we're starting, especially we're going to see mid-season and end of season is when you get a lot of guys that actually will have that type of ceiling that feels like it's out of nowhere, but it's just because the bigger guys have sat and the usage just switched on a dime. Like, he's already, I was just like flipping through the rankings as Laird was doing it too. But like, like Jalen Green is a guy that, if all of a sudden it's like Kevin Porter ever sat, or they just decided to, let's say, hey, Jalen Green was number 2 pick in the draft last year. Like kind of, you said Jamal Crawford, Alex, and actually I like thought of Jalen Green right away because it's a guy that like just cares about getting buckets. Like him like dropping like 60 real points in a game this season, like that wouldn't shock me.
Mhm.
But the hardest part about like relying on a guy like that over and over again is that you're not going to necessarily be able to forecast when that 60 real points is coming. I think that's the whole delineation about why those top like three. And then if you want, even when I think it's fine to put Morant, I think it's fine to put LeBron in there because those guys do have the ceilings, but it's just knowing that the floor is built in to what a lot of dudes' ceilings are, that you can just lock that points in your lineup. And arguably you're going to lock it into your lineup for, on the champion side, you can lock it in for 0 for the L40. So 0 points against your cap. And I can lock in just the highest ceiling and the highest floor. It just makes the most sense to do so.
I think we're going to see a lot of people try to jam in 2 of the top 3. And
I think that's where it could be a mistake though too.
I think those lineups will lose more often than not.
Yep.
Great.
Agreed.
Because that's
you
what I
should
tried.
utilize that top guy.
When I first started playing DFS, I tried to do that a lot, and guess how much I won?
Yeah.
Well, the problem too is like DFS got sharper over the years. Like I can remember playing NBA DFS 5 years ago, and literally all it was find a couple 3K guys that would do okay, jam in the studs. Everybody overplayed the mid tier and couldn't figure out the right guys because projections weren't as prevalent, and you would just print. And now it's just so much sharper that everybody knows who the guys are going to pop off because of the projection systems. So again, I think what we're going to see though very early on in Sorare is that same DFS mentality. That people are going to go star way too scrub, not do well enough, and there are going to be people that exploit the projections, that exploit the L10s and all that type of things, and are going to do really well at the beginning. I'm on record on ours on now here, whatever I've been on, that I think the DFS people or people with the DFS background have a huge advantage to start this off, because they understand, how to react to late news. They understand the whole points per dollar concept that is like, the projection versus the L10. Those type of people that can think that way are going to do really well to begin.
You don't think that that's kind of overblown a little bit, since we only have basically 2 deadline night scrambles a week? Like if something happens midweek, then it doesn't matter. Like that situation is, you can't take advantage of that situation.
Well, I mean, yes and no. Like the Trey Murphy news was for last night, which was a day after, lock. So you still got Tuesday.
No, it was no, it was.
Well, it was Monday.
Lock.
I looked back. We did the stream Monday during lock, but the Zion and Ingram stuff came out like 2 hours before lock, but they didn't play till the next day. So sometimes you get that. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that again, though, there's some people that are going to be pretty good at predicting these rests coming up too. Like, Kawhi right now, we know is every other game he's resting.
Right.
So, we already have kind of the pattern until that changes. I think there's just going to be some people that do a very good job of projecting the ceiling on some of these guys that could pop off if that happens, and, can kind of exploit the system that way. But again, that to me, that's still almost a DFS mindset of if X happens, then Y will pop off. And you just play it that way. And sometimes it won't work, but when it works, you're going to sweat a podium.
The moment has passed, but I would just like to say that the fact that Trey Murphy goes by Trey Murphy the third, are you the third Trey Murphy or are you Trey Murphy? That drives me crazy. Sorry, it's been bugging me.
Because like a double Trey?
His name's Kenneth. His dad's name's Kenneth. He's Kenneth Murphy the third. I'm having too many Excel problems with all these suffixes on names, and this dude's just got to throw one on there, even though it's nonsensical. Drive me crazy.
I'm gonna be like completely.
Who was the one first night that killed you? Nicholas Claxton. It was like Nicholas.
Yes. Yeah. didn't even show up. Go ahead.
I didn't notice that. Like that didn't come to me at all. The Trey Murphy the third now it really bothers me.
Dude, it's horrible.
That's amazing.
You're like my own brother is the third, and he goes by Trey, but he's not Trey Laird the third.
If he was, you should slap him if he ggets a Laird the third jersey, just open hand across the face. That's
man. I wish you didn't say that.
Listen, I have to go through my spreadsheet. I got people asking me for updates on my spreadsheet once an hour, and I got to go through and take Junior off of 90 people's names.
Yeah. I might be able to help you with that later on. Anyway, so do you think that this range in the, I was going to say Anthony Davis, but I don't really want to count him or Kyrie or Durant. So like Damian Lillard, I think is a player so he's got an L10 of 44 right now. I think the general belief is that he's better than that. So like he probably is he's not in the top tier, but he's probably in that second tier. Does that mid-second tier get ignored? Meaning like Julius Randle and Zion and Jaylen Brown and Devin Booker, because everybody has one of the top three guys and they probably want to get somebody from the upper part of that second tier? Or do you get multiple of these guys?
Can I try and answer this first?
Please.
Because I want to know Keith's answer. I would guess those guys are way more worth it in champion than they are in contender. Like, wouldn't you want, I guess maybe 40 might be a little too high, but no, because in champion, you got 120.
No, 40 works
anyway.
well.
Yeah, 40 is about where you can go.
Like Harden was a 40 on like my champion common, and it was a perfect way to fit stuff.
Yeah, I think he might be the best player this weekend.
Yeah, he was.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Harden. I feel like Harden is a bit of an outlier. Although, like Lillard for this game week coming up is 44, which I think, like, I have him in my contender lineup. Like, I fit him, but I don't even want to call these guys are certainly not cheat codes. But like you need to get lucky on the bottom to like fit a 44 in, and so I guess that's what these guys are. These guys are the best players in contender, and they're kind of ignored in champion because theoretically you want your most expensive player in champion who actually costs to like be a star because they can be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think that's where though, like if you want to go projections, that ceiling projections are huge. You know, it's like this guy has the ability to drop 65. You know, so you would prioritize the guy that has the ceiling of 65 versus, you know, I'm going to take your boy Josh Hart.
I was like I'm looking at Josh Hart and Devin Booker as one L10 point away from each other, but like the ceilings are not the same.
But the so it's funny that like you were on that as I saw it, because on our site when we were like preparing on the DFS side when we were preparing a core, I love Josh Hart one night. And my partner there's like, you know, I just don't think he has the ceiling, but I'm like, oh, but it has price. His floor is about 6x. You know, if I get 7x from a 5K guy, I'm plenty happy. And he dudded. And it's just like, like it wasn't worth the risk on a guy that doesn't have a ceiling. So I think the same thing applies on the Sorare side of things, that, you know, burning 35. Well, what was Hart's LTN? Just so I get the numbers right.
He was Hart's 37 and Booker's 38.
Like there's no situation ever that if you had a gallery that you have Booker and Hart that you would ever choose Hart over Booker.
What?
Like, or in my opinion, there should never be a situation that you would rationalize that decision.
What if it's one game versus 3?
I get it, but we already established that, you know, Josh Hart. I don't have the numbers, but Josh Hart's done more than 50 one time in the last 80 games.
75.
And Booker's right, but look where that is at the end of the season.
Right.
Too.
I just never would have thought. I don't know what he had to do to get a 75. Did he put up 56 points?
I mean, I think he had a triple double. I think I remember that game. But the point is that you have one blip, right? But look at that lineup. Laird, go back.
He dropped 44. My boy.
But look at the lineup.
44, 8, and
Look at
6. 4 steals. Yeah, I've literally never heard of these guys. Is that Bernie Williams from the Yankees in 1996?
I have a Drew Eubanks comment, and he had like a 33. I'm like,
but
who is
like
this?
So actually, like, I'm kind of glad we brought this up. I didn't know that Josh Hart would get us there. But this is end of season NBA right in front of you.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Like, it's the most beautiful time of the year for DFS. It's going to be a beautiful time for Sorare because Devin Eubanks, or was it Drew? I can't remember his name. Like, he was a consistent DFS play over and over again because Nurkic was out, Lillard was out. They just traded CJ McCollum. Like, Portland was full out. We're just going to go to the bottom. We're going to improve our draft pick. Dame will be back next year. Nurkic will be back next year. They knew they had some cap room. They're going to go spend some money. They're like, it doesn't matter. And Josh Hart probably walks in. He's like, can I take 30 shots today, coach? Sure, man. Go for it.
Let's do it.
Have a day. Have a day. Like, but I mean, again, it's back to, but now Paul Booker, and, we have a lot more green and we have a lot more showing the upside. So to me, yes, I would take one game of Devin Booker over Josh Hart there, because at least I'm drawing to more high end outs than Hart that, it's like, thanks Josh for 32, 32 and 34 this 3 games this week. That was very much appreciated because he doesn't have the ability to do ceiling with Dame Lillard on the court, with Nurkic on the court. Jeremy Grant is taking more shots than him right now. So I think you just have to evaluate those things and not just in the numbers. But I mean, Laird, I don't mean to switch topic, but like, are we going to have those type of things at SorareData? I know you kind of want to talk a little bit about what might be to come, or did I get too far ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to show a few things. I mean, obviously, what's on the screen here is what we have on SorareData. So this is the rankings page,
which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of stuff when it comes to projections and just the player page itself. Like, if I go back to Booker here, like, you can see the actual like ceiling scores that he's had in the past as opposed to just projected ones. So yes, we're doing a bunch of stuff like that. Time frame is the question, so I don't want to give too much away, but we have been working like on a ton of stuff. Like, the list is not short of what we're planning on coming out with, so just bear with us as we work through it. But I hate to say that I keep looking at this list and it's like just guy after guy that under Hart that I would just never play Hart, or that I would always play Hart over. Like Towns, DeMar DeRozan could go off. Like Bradley Beal can go. Like all these guys. Like Josh Hart is like borderline unplayable at 37.
He is, and again though, that's kind of.
I don't even know why he's at 37.
What's funny though,
because once the 75 drops off, he'll be playable.
Right, and then he actually might become half decent of a play because maybe he almost gets undervalued.
Might be time to buy him because that 75 is going to fall off, and all of a sudden he might be valuable to someone.
Right.
Depending on his price.
As somebody who already overpaid for a Josh Hart card for a completely unrelated reason to his L10 of 37, I really hope I can use that card at some point. So I want to jump over to a few more of the questions that we got. I feel like the gameplay, like I think we know what we want to do. And it's just a matter of whether we're able to build those teams as soon as Champion is out and also have the players for Contender for that. I'll ask this question just because it was sent in. Do you think that a missed shot should be a negative score? For example, someone shooting 5 of 5 gets the same points as someone shooting 5 of 20.
Nope.
Yeah, me neither.
Nope, that's not in basketball.
Right, like
because I mean, your
star always want the guy who takes 20 shots.
I mean, I remember hearing this one time on like a more analytic basketball pod, but we're picking on Josh Hart, but Josh Hart does not get the ball. Like when Josh Hart gets the ball with 5 seconds left in the shot clock, he's not like, okay, this is my time to create. He's like looking for Lillard, and he's like, Dame, like you deal with this. Like that's Lillard's job to have to take the contested shot at the end of the shot clock. Josh Hart's job is to get the open look with 12 seconds on the shot clock and decide if he wants to take the shot. So it's not a fair stat because the star players have a lot more onus on them and a lot more contested shots that they have to take.
I think that's where I would land as well. So, Alex, do you think that the point caps are correct or optimal or good? However, I don't know how I'm going to answer. I'll actually ask that, but I think you're muted now, though.
I am. My dog was barking. Without having a whole ton of reference of what another cap would look like, I enjoy what my teams look like in both common, contender, and champion. I think there's enough there to keep me interested. I would be upset if they raised the cap on contender. Do whatever you want with champion, I don't care. But I like where contender's at. I think if you add more, it's just kind of, I'd still play it. I'd still have fun, but I like the difficulty. I don't expect to win. But I think it would be rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see what it would look like if there was an MVP in contender, which would just be a lower cap than champion. But
yeah,
I would also like to see a higher cap in a non-MVP or something like that. Playing around with it would be fun. Sorry, this is a way too extra answer. The way that it is, though, I like it, and I would be fine if they never changed it.
Keith, you agree?
You, Laird. I'm shifting to you. I feel like you have something to say on this.
The only thing I'll say is that I think it complicates it that they're different. Yep. And I know that like you have an MVP that doesn't count, but it just feels very like your lineups are not, and I say this after like really struggling to like fit in some at 110, but like I don't think lineups are drastically different between 110 and 120. And so just make contender 120.
If they moved it to 120, I would be completely okay with that.
Like I can't for the
nobody would know. Nobody would know the difference.
Right, yeah. Other than like, oh, I can play a guy that's not 2 that is expected to score.
I don't
5.
need Bull this week. Great.
Yeah.
My George Hill becomes a Grayson Allen.
Yeah. No, I for so many reasons it bothers me, and I just don't know what the reason is that you wouldn't just make them the same, and then one happens to not count the best player. Like,
agreed.
Fundamentally, just make them the same. I don't.
Can I do one of the questions that I saw that we all talked about? But I'm going to pose it to you, Laird.
Yes, I'm just going to.
The one that's already.
I'm just going to add one more thing to what I just said. I don't think.
Okay, go for it.
I don't think the market changes at all if they raise contender to 120. Like they're changing game rules always, like almost always affects the market. And while the market is still kind of like absurd because we have no idea like nobody knows really what they're doing, but I don't think player prices change that drastically if we have 120 in contender then versus 110. So like I think it's an easy change.
The only people that prices changed are the players that probably shouldn't have been priced as high as they are. Like the crappy players that spike, they come down, which is what should happen anyways.
Yeah, like it very much feels like they're trying to build the game so that like every card is worth the same,
has value,
and like you
at some point has the ability to be worth money, like worth like actual like good money.
Yeah.
So the question I had that I saw was collectability on the NBA side. Do you find, and this is going directly to Laird as the guy that's already started the collection, do you find it that NBA is going to be more collector friendly than football has in the past?
So I have a lot of opinions on the whole like collectability thing when it comes to Sorare cards. And so I don't even know really where to start. I'll start by explaining why you sent this question to me. So I went to Villanova. I'm a huge Villanova basketball fan, and I love every player that ever went to Villanova. And so there happen to be some that are in the NBA. We talked about one earlier in Josh Hart, which is why I own his card. So I basically was like, I'm going to collect all the Villanova guys. And that that is collecting. Like, I bought these cards because I wanted to have them, and there some of these cards I paid an amount that, like, there's no reason for anyone to pay these amounts, but because it was me and somebody else who was like, oh yeah, I kind of want that card, like, and so I bought these cards for more than they're worth. Like, some of these cards are downright like worthless in the game. And so I collected these to have them. Like, I wanted them. I wanted to keep them. But I think when a lot of people talk about making these things more collectible, is less of let's make something that everybody wants to keep. And it's more, let me make this so that somebody buys it and somebody else wants it too, and so that they can make a profit on it. And so I have a really hard time when people are like, they need to make these things more collectible, because most of the time, I'm not saying everybody does this, but most of the time that means I've collected something and it's not worth as much as I think it is. And so they need to do something so that somebody will pay me more than what I paid for this collectible. And I don't think they're like saying this in bad faith, but I think there's a very big difference between like buying something because you like it and you want to have it, versus buying something because you think somebody else might want it and you could get more for that than you paid for it. And so I think Sorare can do certain things to make things more collectible. If every player that went to Villanova had a Sorare NBA card that had a Villanova V on the back of it, I would sell my kids' college fund and buy them all. But I would keep them. Like, I'm not buying that because I'm expecting somebody else who also went to Villanova to pay me more for those. And so, for the record, this is not financial advice, and I'm not actually selling my kids' college funds for this stuff. I sold it earlier for soccer. And so, but like, so I think we need to like make it very clear in terms of like, whatever the ideas that people have to make things more collectible. And I think one of the funny things is that they're like, you need to make these things more collectible. And it's like, well, how would you do that? And they're like, I don't know, but like, you do something so that this thing I bought is worth more. And it's like, if the solution is not that easy, then I assume they're working on something to like make things more collectible. But I think this idea came from Top Shot. And I've never bought a Top Shot moment.
Smart man.
And I have no desire to buy one now. Like, nothing has changed on that. And the big reason why I got into Sorare instead of Top Shot was like the fantasy game. Like, I thought the utility was there for the fantasy game, and I had fun with the fantasy game. But it feels like all of the collecting part of Top Shot is buy these things and we'll give you another thing. And like, that's not collecting, that's buying something to get something else. And so
that's still trying to get utility out of the collection, so to speak.
Right. And I see all of these tweets now of people who like went to NBA games because Dapper or Top Shot sent them there, and they were like, see, this is real world utility. And I'm like, this is the first time you've seen this. Not everyone got it. And you probably paid more for the moments than you did for the game ticket. And so like, I apologize that I'm like really ranting on this, and I'm completely ignorant when it comes to Top Shot. And so it's probably unfair of me to like even compare them. But the collectible aspect of Sorare, like if you're talking about Sorare being a collectible, you need to be very clear of whether you want them to make them collectible because you want to have them or because you want to buy them and just sell them to somebody else. And if that's the case, like, there is a buy and sell mechanism in this game. This is like the first thing we talked about. And so like, just do that. Like, Jersey mints are fun because like, oh, the numbers are the same, but like, and there are people who pay more for them, and we see this all the time. I did it myself, like in NBA.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I wanted the 1 of 100 Ryan Archidiakono. Like nobody should want that card. I missed the auction and I paid somebody else for it. Like that's good flip for them. And like now I'm collecting it and I have it, and like I have no reason to sell it. But like that's a collectible to me. Like Sorare made something that was collectible to me and I bought it. So like I don't think that the collectible that like making these collectibles is a problem. Like I think the problem is actually people who think they're like, oh, I want to be a collector. And it's like, no, you just want to buy something and sell it for more. And you just need Sorare to like come up with a new way for things to become expensive.
They want to be rewarded extra for collecting. Sorare gave them the mechanism to collect, saying, go ahead, collect. And they're like, okay, now give me a prize for collecting. It's like, no. The prize is how you feel collecting. Like, that's actually how it should be.
Like, I told you, I don't even remember if it was that Archidiakono card. It might have been like Josh. Oh, I know exactly what it was. So I have the Mikal Bridges limited jersey mint. Mikal Bridges, I mean, like he went to Villanova, one of my favorite players. And I was like so pumped to get this card. And I way overpaid for this thing. And there's like, I'm not looking to sell this thing. And so I'm like, I collected this. And so Sorare made this card that not only had his son's number on it, but it was the same number he wore at Villanova. So like, I have that. But like, if somebody was like, I'll give you double for it, like I have no reason to, I didn't buy it to flip it. And so, yeah, I just think that the whole collectible angle comes from not, I want to own this thing. It's, I bought this thing because I think somebody else will pay me more for it. And I need Sorare to do something so that somebody does that. And I'm not there myself.
My grandparents collected tons, just every Coca-Cola thing you could ever imagine.
Sure.
And I don't think my grandpa was doing that because he wanted to resell his Coca-Cola empire for 2x down the line. He did it because the man loved Coca-Cola, and that's collecting, not what you mentioned, trying to get something out of it.
Now, I don't think that there's like anything wrong with like I think there are people who like buy jersey mint cards or like physical cards for the purpose of like, I think somebody else will pay me more for this. Like I think that's fine. And it's kind of like the foundation of this game that like you're going to buy guys for cheap. And then when they do well, or they do really poorly and now they fit in the cap better, and you can sell it for more, like that's fine. Like that's part of this game. But to like call that collecting, or like if you get every Lakers player card this year and that gets you like a Lakers ticket, like that's great. Like I think those are the ideas that people have, but it's like you're just collecting something to get something else. And I think we just need to be more honest about that.
Just be happy with your collection. Like look at it and be happy. I'm very happy with my 28 2 thumbs up Hannes Van Bergen limited card. It makes me crack up every time I look at my gallery. It's not worth anything, right? But it makes me crack up. So it's cool.
I have a Jan Gomes jersey mint limited in baseball, kind of for the same reason. It makes me think of the time that one of the reporters fell asleep talking to him, and Jan Gomes made fun of him.
That's awesome.
Right. So like things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's the point of collecting.
That's like we said, Josh Hart, terrible play. And I have 2 of his cards. Like just stuff like that. Like these are the cards that I was.
But you're
like,
never going to sell them. Like that's the point. You're just not going to sell them, and that's the point. It's like you're not trying to flip it for a profit. You're just trying to collect because you get joy out of going through this and going, I am the only guy that would do this.
Right. Nobody else.
And these were guys that I love it.
For getting the 1 of 100, 1 of 1,000, and 1 of 5,000 Ryan Archidiakono. All right.
You also you collected the Bridges cards, and he's my favorite play this weekend. Best points per dollar in the top 10% of whatever. And I'll be damned if you're not going to have more fun following him this week than you did every other time.
Absolutely. And that's exactly how I feel about it. And so, yeah, any week he's a top value, I'm in. The last thing, we've gone a little long here. The last thing I wanted to touch on, or at least give away, is a look at our lineup builder. We're hoping that this is it could be out by the time some people catch this. If you are listening to the audio version of this, then stop and look at a screen. But if you can't, if you're listening on Spotify, I will say the video is available on Spotify. So
pull over
check that
car
out
right now. It's
right.
gonna be that
Pull over.
Changer.
Right. We're what? Hour and 15 in. And so the lineup builder, let me see if I can stretch this a little bit here. Looks a lot like our soccer one, if anyone's familiar with it, but you have all your players. We'll have all of the contests available, some filters here. And then we've got the L10, the best projected game from the game week, whatever the differential is versus their L10, and then kind of a ratio, which all of these are sortable columns. So if you just click that, you can see which, well, sorry, this is a production page, but like you can see who the top like projection to L10 player is. Then we have the L10 minutes, the best game projected minutes, and the difference in case you want to see which player has the highest minute projection difference than what they normally play. You know, if they normally play 22 and they're going to get 38, you can get that. And then obviously the number of games and then the matchups that they have in the game week, along with the projected points in each game and the projected minutes. And then when you just add someone, then the little bar here gets smaller as you add more players. And as you can see, the gigantic jump from 110 down to 59, which is why nobody plays Steph Curry in Contender. But as soon as Champion's here, you'll be able to get him in. But
you'll be at 0.
But yeah, exactly. You'll be at 0. And then you just go in and get all of your Villanova guys in, just like what everybody else does. And but yeah, so that's what it looks like. There's going to be a lot more in there, but this is just the production page. And so hopefully this is out soon for all of those who are watching this soon. And then, yeah, so there's that. So I think we're going to call it quits. Oh, the one last thing I wanted to add. I'm sorry. I was going to bring this up on this when we were here earlier. If you go to our player rankings page and you're like, man, I really need a guy with like an L10 of 15 for this game week. Just move our slider here and filter, and you should, get all of the terrible players who have 15 average. And there you go. Off you go with Chris Duarte or Grayson Allen. That's it.
So it's funny, real quick. I'm going to go one long, gonna like nerd out real quick, and you're going to be proven right for a minute. Jose Alvarado got the surprise start last night, which, to your point, we would not have projected before lock.
There we go.
And then I think he did pretty well. He did pretty well last night. 24
4 points on an L10, 15. It's not bad.
Which is pretty decent.
Yeah.
Which is pretty decent. So,
yeah.
But obviously, if you would have known that going in, then.
See?
It'll be fun, man.
It'll
be fun.
So yeah, thank you to everybody who joined us. If you guys could please hit the like button on the video, that is always really appreciated. We're going to do these shows pretty regularly, so if you want to subscribe to the channel, it's SorareData NBA. Also, we're going to just have these on our regular podcast audio feed. It's going to be all the sports on the same feed. So we're going to try to do some different logos. So if you are really into NBA and you don't care about soccer or baseball when those shows start up, then you can easily just skip those. But Alex and Keith, thank you very much for all the help today, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, guys.